Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome back to the Future of Work podcast. This is Al Loveland, along with my partner, Kyle McIntosh. Say hi, Kyle.
Hey, Al.
And this month we have two distinguished guests from the strategy expert. We have Scott Romeo, the head man, and Ed Wold. I guess you're the head part of the patent piece. So before we get started, what we want to talk about today is strategy season and strategy, and businesses getting prepared for that. So first of all, let's get the people to get to know you a little bit. Scott, take us from what got you involved in strategy, and what do you do with strategy? And better yet is, what is strategy?
Oh, well, for the next
and
4
hours.
5 minutes. So this is my 32nd year of consulting. I started out in the mining industry in West Virginia, and I got hired as an internal consultant at the time, and I really liked consulting. And I was working with some other consultants who were external consultants who were earning in a month about what I was earning a year as an internal consultant. And I thought, oh, if the opportunity ever presents itself, I kind of know what I want to do for the rest of my life. I want to be in the consulting industry. And that opportunity came up not too far along when the coal industry diminished greatly, and I had to look for a job. And I looked across. I started on the East Coast, came all the way across, and this area was coming out of the recession the fastest, and I knew this is where I could open a consulting firm. So that was the spring of 1993, and I'm stuck in a rut, and I've been doing it ever since then. So I started out on just local clients, and that evolved eventually into working with 14 multinational corporations in Southeast Asia, mainly helping them with strategic relationships, joint ventures, and strategic alliances. Along the way, I've written 3 books on strategy, one of which is now recommended reading at a Belgium management and business school. And I've been teaching strategy at the university level for, I think, 23, maybe 24 years now.
It's a great course. I've had 2 of them. So before we get to strategy, and people might be so sucked in, we don't want Ed to get short shrift here. So Ed, tell us about yourself, and tell us about patents and what you got involved in wanting to be a lawyer.
Yeah, very good. Well, I'm a patent agent, and born and raised on the farm in Canada, and I always liked the warm weather because we took a trip to Florida one year in the middle of the winter. So I thought, well, I want to be in the South. And so anyway, in my young life, I always kind of liked the engineering side of things and designing and creating solutions for things. So that's kind of what got me into that. And then I decided to make the jump across the border, go to Montana and do some schooling to follow up on the stuff in Calgary. So finished up my engineering, and then I took project management because I thought that went well. And then I always liked the inventive side of things, and to really to help independent inventors and small companies to, do their innovation and kind of develop things good for society and good for industry.
So take us through just one thing real quick. If someone's thinking about like how to get a patented, what got you involved in that?
Yeah, so I had some ideas of my own, and then I had friends and projects in school and stuff. And so, generally you come up with an idea, and it might be on a napkin or something, and thinking about it. No, what should I do with it? Most people don't really know kind of what a patent is or the patent process. So I looked into that, and you start out with a search generally and just see if it's already out there. If it's already out there, there's no sense recreating the wheel again. So you kind of either move to something different, or if it looks like it's kind of new, then you go ahead with it and see what's close and what's not, and then kind of develop it from there and get something really new on the market is the ideal goal.
In just listening to this, I just got one question for the two of you, or just something that has popped in my mind, is that if you're somebody out there right now, there's a lot of people that are like, I have this great idea. or they're sitting there behind their desk saying, oh my goodness, if I got to sit here and work another 5 years, I might jump off a bridge or something like that. But then have an idea and they say, okay, it's either a concept or some kind of need that they see. And there's probably two paths that you can take from that. One is patenting your idea so someone doesn't steal it. And then once you have your ideas, what's your strategy to be able to go out and implement it in order to be successful? Because, that dream that you have, probably the first step to making it a reality is either to get a patent and to get a strategy to be able to kind of implement that. Would I be close in thinking that's close?
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to have strategy with everything. That's why I was so intrigued by what Scott did with the strategy. And so it was a really good mixture with the innovation, because there's all kinds of companies, individuals that are looking to develop stuff, and they got to go through that development phase, and then it's to have the strategy to put it into use. And it's not an easy thing. So to have that good plan in place and then work towards it strategically is really good.
We offer a series of one-day strategy sessions, and one of them is called Concept to Cash. And that's where you take that idea that you've sketched out on that napkin, how you develop the strategy behind it, how you patent it, and then how you leverage that IP, sell it or license it or whatever you want to do with it.
I was on your website today and looking around.
It's being rebuilt, so
and it was interesting looking at it, a number of the one day or the courses that what you've got built out. What did I write down? The Eureka Zone. That I love that name, by the way. So would you say strategy is a overarching one thing, or is it focusing on those specific areas and it just depends where you are?
That's another 4-hour discussion that we need to have. So there's two parts to that. There's the overall arching strategy, which is your corporate strategy, where you want the organization to go overall. But then it breaks down into operational and functional strategies as well. And that's how you take that idea and where you want it to go, and you break it down into what actually needs to take place to make that a reality.
And I always view it too as the strategy is kind of the umbrella portion for kind of everything else that fits in neatly underneath it, because it's really hard to go from A to B with no plan, and the strategy makes that happen.
So I wrote something down today, and I've heard I can't tell what the my sense is of your guys' feelings on this, so I'm just going to lay it out there. So Peter Drucker, culture eats strategy for breakfast. What? Respond, please.
You've been talking to Al too much. Yes, Peter Drucker has definitely said that. I think you need both. I think you need to have the strategy in place, and you need to have a solid strategy, which most organizations skip over and go right to goal setting and think that they have a strategy. And I think that's where that quote comes in, then, is because they skip on the strategy part. They develop the goals, and then the goals don't come to reality. Okay? It's like all those people who at the beginning of the year set a New Year's resolution and they're going to lose so many pounds by July 1st. How many of them actually achieve that? And they don't, because they concentrate too much on that end result, which is a goal. And organizations do the exact same thing. And unless you back up and develop all those strategies and then pick the right team and successfully implement those strategies, then Peter Drucker is going to be correct.
Yeah, I think that one thing that we do here at MaxX is we work with businesses, running from 100 down to a sole entrepreneur. And a lot of times you have people with a lot of great ideas. And then I think that people fail to have the right kind of culture because they don't have the right kind of strategy. Like we were just having a conversation with someone recently about the goals that they had, and the goals might be unattainable. And when they go back and they skip that strategy step about what path are you going to take? What kind of actions, behaviors, and timelines are you going to take? And then is it possible for somebody to be able to do that? And what I find is with people that I've worked with in the past is that you find people burdened with unrealistic expectations and they fail. And that was like the question I always would go back to ask, was it the strategy? Was it the person, or was it the environment? Because you could be executing right. And, like we found out in 2020 that things were crashing. So if I were to ask you a question for somebody right now, we're closing in on August. When should they start thinking about their strategic plan for 2025, 26, 27?
They should already be starting that process.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
Talk about August 22nd.
We'll get to that.
But, most organizations that are on a calendar year for sure start at the beginning of the last quarter of the year, if not earlier. The bigger the organization, the earlier they start, generally speaking. You don't want to find yourself in November and then start thinking about what do we want to be next year. That's a little bit too late in the process. The next part of that, which is always a tricky thing, is along with strategy development, you also have budgeting. And the question always comes up, should we do the budget first or should we do the strategy first? And most organizations have already started budgeting by this point, but that's the wrong approach. You should do the strategy first and then do the budgeting, because strategies can be built into the budgeting. So there are all kinds of opportunities to look at, and you look at it and you say, well, gee, we would really like to do that, but there's not enough money in the budget. Well, we can design strategies around that. Let's get some investors. Okay, maybe we kill another project. Maybe we sell off a cash cow. So strategy should come first, cash flow second, and they should already be in that process.
Okay.
If I'm just getting something started, I've got this fire in my belly, I've got an idea, I'm able to protect it, it's something new, and I've got to get out there and do two things at the same time: sell it and think about the future strategically. Where is this business going and what are the real opportunities? There must be a balance that's built into, I've got to take functional steps to make things happen without total constraint on needing to focus on strategy every second. But I've got to have enough there that I've built out to be heading generally in the right direction. How do you find that balance?
That's very hard for an entrepreneur because they're wearing every hat in the organization oftentimes, or at least nearly every hat. So without sales, they don't have cash flow, and it doesn't matter if they have a strategy or not, because if they don't have cash flow to pay rent or their team, then they're not going to get a successful implementation anyway. But if you spend enough time, and then the question is, what's enough time? You have to create at least the macro or the corporate strategy first, because you mentioned sales. There might be a point where I say, you should not be out selling anything. Let's just do a strategic relationship with that company over there, because they already have your clients that you're looking for. And you don't need to sell anything, just partner with them. That happens during the strategy session, not during the sales session.
And that's one thing that we find with entrepreneurs and, people that come to co-working places or have a small office, have anywhere from 1 to 5 or 6 employees. I'm going to quote one of your favorite guys again, Peter Drucker. He said that the goal of anybody in business is to have your shoulder to the wheel along with your eyes on the horizon. And so many times what I find with your small business owners is they're into the day-to-day, and they don't pause to look forward to say, okay, if this happens, what are the next steps going to be, and what things do I have to do to be able to handle that? Because one of the worst things that I find for people is that they fail because they're successful. They don't plan ahead and have a strategy about how to deal when things happen. So Scott, one thing you talk a lot about is developing a strategic mindset. What is that, and how does somebody develop it?
So that is, it's kind of like art. It's in the eye of the beholder. So a strategic mindset will vary from person to person and depending upon the business that they're in. But in general, it's having the ability to step back from the day-to-day, from the operational and the functional stuff that's going on every day, the fires that's burning, the problems that you're facing, and saying, how can we bypass all of that? How can we skip over that and move our organization from where it is today to the next level? Okay? And maybe these problems and fires go away if we do that successfully, if we get the right strategy. And you mentioned small businesses, but I've found the same thing in mid-size and even larger organizations. They come into the office every day. They're tending to that fire burning on the desk, and other than the 3-day retreat that they do for strategy, where they go off to a golf course and, quote, do a strategy retreat on the 9th hole, they don't spend a lot of time developing strategy, not nearly enough time. And I think you can find studies from McKinsey and others that say even executives of mid-sized and large organizations do not think strategically enough. They don't have that strategic mindset.
Is it too oversimplified to say that business is business and it's just different issues depending on the size of a business, and it's get work, do work, get paid for work, and versions of that? Like, I'm thinking about if I'm talking to somebody just starting out a business and they're thinking about, look at all this stuff ahead of me, I have no idea what I'm going to get into. That strategic mindset would be the same with just different levels of what those issues are the whole time if you can establish it early.
There's some commonality. I mean, strategic planning, strategic thinking, strategic mindset is a process across the board. Now, the nuances then become, what's our core competency? What do we do very well? What should we be doing? What should we be outsourcing to somebody else to do because we really shouldn't be in that business? Okay, that's a strategic decision. But unless you stop and really think about that and say, we've done a SWOT analysis. Our strengths say our strengths of this area, but we're spending all of our time over here doing that. Why are we doing that? Okay, let's outsource that to somebody else. That's a strategic mindset, a strategic decision.
So how do you build the strategic muscles? Like if I want to go to muscles, I want to go to a gym. If I'm a business owner and I'm sitting there, I'm saying, how do I go about, like, is there a strategic treadmill I run on? Is there a strategic weight room that I work on? What would you recommend to them to say, would it be 15 or 20 minutes, reading a book? Would it be listening to a seminar? Would it be, reading, would be getting Diamond Eyes? Would that be something that they would be able to go get? Tell us about, like, so if I'm an owner and say, okay, how do I get that strategic mindset? How do I practice it?
Well, you have to learn it first before you practice, because as we said, most people think goal setting is strategic planning, and goal setting is what you expect to happen on the last day of implementation. So you have to back up a little bit and get the resources and the mindset that you need to do that. So I tell everybody, spend 15 to 20 minutes every day in a strategic mindset. Now, maybe you go online and you watch a YouTube video. Maybe you have a strategy book that you're reading. What I do is I try to pick a topic that I know very little or nothing about and read it, because that expands my mind. And then I think, gee, I wonder how that could be applied in this environment, because this is new to me. I've never heard this before. So I think getting yourself out of your comfort zone, and I've shared with you, Al, about traveling the world and, dropping me off in a country where I don't understand the culture and the language, and for me to understand and get that develops that mindset. I've got to have a strategic mindset to survive in this environment, because I don't even know the rules that are being played here in this culture. It's the same way a new employee does when they enter an organization. They don't know the culture. They don't know the political game. If leadership would share the strategy with them and that strategic mindset, they would understand the culture much easier, and they would be able to help implement what that strategy is. But most organizations, unfortunately, don't do that. So nobody develops that strategic mindset until this time of year, the last quarter, when they say, oh, gee, it's time to start talking about strategy again. Maybe we should pick up that new book that we saw, or let's watch some YouTube videos on strategy and see what we can learn about that.
So Al asked me a question a year plus ago that was pretty profound and simple. And what does it look like to walk out of here on a Friday and say, we had a successful week? What does done look like? What does that look like? And so I'm curious for both of you, and strategy and protecting your strategy, and just at what point do you say that was successful? We're done here. Is it, we had a meeting, I sat in a meeting with you guys, with Christian and American Commercial Cleaning, and it was a 90-minute strategy session, and it felt like, wow, this is great. A lot of this came out of here. But do you guys get that intrinsic reward? Is that what you call done? Great, we got some new ideas into his head. Or are you looking for, I want to see results?
So that's great. And we enjoyed the session with Christian. And in those 90-minute sessions, I look for that 8 seconds of that aha moment, and where they say, oh, never thought of that before in my life. You know, that is great. Thank you. I'm going to go back and do that. That happens about once in about 8 seconds in those 90-minute strategy sessions. And that's what I look for. And that's what I live for in those 90-minute sessions. But that's just the beginning of the process. That's the identification of the idea. Now you have to go back and implement each of those new ideas that are created there. And unfortunately, for most people, once they leave a strategy session, they say, I got to go back to the office because that fire is still burning on my desk that I left before I went to the strategy session. And that sounds great. And I would like to partner with somebody or grow geographically. But right now, I got to make cash flow. I got to make payroll for this week. And too many people get wrapped up back into that day-to-day operational and functional areas, and they abandon the strategic mindset. So unless you have a constant every day, 15 or 20 minutes reminder, you're going to spend your entire time at your company putting out fires.
Guilty.
Yeah.
I'd say for me, I would say my high five moment, that real excitement moment, comes way further down the path than for Scott. It's when I see when they've came from an idea on a napkin and then it's sitting on a store shelf for sale and they're actually getting a check from it. That's what I love, because I can envision this whole process that they've went through, and we've been a party to that and help them where they needed, and that really good interaction together, and then get it to success where it's actually making some money and helping society and whatever. It's, for the person that created the dishwasher, it said happy housewife or whatever, that came home and the husband bought it and in the 60s or whatever. And wow, it's like, we don't have to wash our dishes tonight.
So Ed,
I'll add to that I have a macro strategic mindset, and Ed has a more micro implementation mindset. And you have to have both of those in an organization, or you're not going to have success. So that's why we work well together. And sometimes we have to stop and say, okay, you're thinking of that from a micro. I'm thinking, because it is a different mindset.
Can you give an example where you guys would have not opposing, but the two sides to what to think about?
I would say it's a very dynamic relationship. And I think most of the things that interest us are fairly dynamic as versus static. And I would say even on building a lot of the content, it's like, well, what do you think? Where's the goal for this? What's the objective of the student or the business owner or whatever? And how are we going to get there? And so I think it's kind of lining that up, and then he'll be thinking the long shot strategy, and I'll be thinking the long shot for the monetizing or whatever. And just got to kind of come together and say, what's a very practical way to do it, and so that we can we can share what we're thinking with the client or whoever, so they can see the end goal. And then the exciting part too is when they're kind of in the game with us on it too. So I think that's very nice.
We had a new client meeting the other day, and on the way back, I'm thinking about, okay, we need to strategically partner this particular client with defense contractors. Okay. So I'm thinking very big picture. And before I go to bed that night, he's micro thinking, and he's emailing me an Excel spreadsheet with all of the micro details in it. So it works very well together.
One of my favorite stories, I was with my sister once, we were at a Phillies game. If you guys are familiar with the Philly Fanatic, she sat there and she said, it'd be cool. I would love to get like a Fanatic, where it'd be like a hat that you would pull over and it had the Fanatic up top, and then you could sell them. And so, a year went by, we came back, and all over the ballpark was her idea. And she sat there and she says, I can't believe somebody else had my idea. And they actually went out, patented it, sold it, and made a lot of money do it. So we all like to think that our ideas are individual, but there's somebody out there pondering the same thing right now. And take us through, like, once I had that idea, like, why get a patent, and what's the speed, and how do you go about getting that that advantage, or getting it where it's your idea versus other people's, and what does that look like?
Yeah, very good. So in the example that you gave, it's like, and generally in life, a lot of things are time is of the essence, right? And especially in the States, we used to be a first to
First to
first to
file.
invent country, and now we're first to file like the rest of the world. So truly is whoever is in with that stamp from the patent office gets the rights to that property. So the best idea is to go out, and if you got an idea, write it down and then do a search on it and see if it's out there. And then if it is, it is. But if it isn't, then follow down that road and be pretty diligent about it, right? Because a lot of things get put off and procrastinated on. And if you could have been the one that was selling all those hats to all those fans, right? That'd be a pretty sweet thing. And you hear that almost every day, that I had that idea, but I just didn't act on it, and now it's kind of too late. And so I think it's to get in there and get knowledgeable on it, like anybody else does. You just start reading on it and start asking around, take a class, get knowledgeable on it, and then get some good help going through the process.
If there's somebody that has an idea and they don't know what to do, why do they call you? So like, what are the first like 2 or 3 things that if I have an idea like that, why I call Ed? What's Ed tell me?
Well, first I tell them kind of where they're at, ask them where they're at on it, and kind of what's their thoughts, give them to give me the full view of what they've thought so far, and then talk it through with them from there, and just see. I always recommend a search right away, because if you're doing something that's already out there, you're wasting time and effort, and it's better to know real quick in the process and to be brutally honest with yourself, right? And find somebody truly that understands your invention too. There's no sense going taking a mechanical invention to a chemistry educated fellow. So find somebody knowledgeable, also somebody that you can work with too, somebody that's friendly and kind of proactive on things and pushes you a little bit.
One thing I'm curious about with this, I think when people think about patents and there's patents and trademarks and all kinds of way to protect things, but they think about like, I created this pen and it's a physical thing that's going to end up on a shelf, and I created the design and I can protect my ability to know and can do exactly what I'm doing here, versus a services company that's doing something that maybe they had an idea that was totally novel and new, and they want to protect their specific way they do that. Or I would guess a lot of them sort of find their way through the years, but I don't think people think about that type of protecting that type of stuff as much as they do like a physical product. What type of stuff is out there that people aren't thinking about?
Yeah, we'll say with Coca-Cola would be a good example, where it's like a trademark deal, or Nike shoes, or Kentucky Fried Chicken. So there you can get yourself a patent, and you can have the best patent in the world, but you're going to only have maximum that 20 years of protection. And then everybody can make Kentucky Fried Chicken exactly how you make it. So that'd be a good example of a trade secret, or the Coca-Cola trade secret, or Pepsi, or whatever. So it's really kind of knowing what protection works well for you, and then getting that and getting really good quality work done on it.
I'll add that we've created a strategy process to reduce it down to 1 day, and we call it strategy in a day. And we have filed that with the U.S. Patent Office as proprietary to us.
And what's proprietary? The name or the system that you've created for that day?
The system, the process that we use, the uniqueness of it. For example, one thing is we start at the end. At the very beginning of the session, we start with the vision, which is after full execution. So we start at the end and we work backwards in reverse chronological order. So that's kind of a unique approach that we take to doing strategic planning.
So from the standpoint, if I have this great idea and I want to execute it, but I don't know how or what direction to go, that's potentially where a strategy in a day for an inventor's piece would be something, because you might want to sell your idea to somebody. You may want to, who's going to manufacture it, who's going to sell it, who's going to do these things. So take me through what that would look like if I'm an inventor and I had this great idea, but I don't know what to do with it afterwards to make the dream a reality.
So I'll start and then I'll hand it over to Ed to finish on it. So generally, you have to figure out your overall strategy and what you want to do with that and what your vision of that idea is, and make sure you have that in place. And then you have to figure out then, how am I going to monetize or make money from this? So, and this is where Ed and I overlap a little bit. It's how do you leverage your intellectual property that you have developed then? Because if you develop it, that's great. And if you follow it, that's great. But if you're not monetizing it, Ed says this all the time, if you're going to put it on a shelf, you're not going to make money from it, then what is the value in that? So then we talk about, should you license that idea or that technology then, or that patent? Should you sell it to somebody? What happens if you sell your business then? Do you sell your IP along with it? Or do you put it in your name and license it to the company that you're selling, so that you sell the company with the idea that they're going to continue to pay you a license agreement and you're going to have residual income then from it? So there's a strategy behind the scene that goes along with the actual practical application of the intellectual property, the patent. So.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, more back on the process route, is that so you've got this great idea, but unless you get it out of your head and down into really good drawings and really good specification, what they call it, or the text that goes with the verbal explaining of your invention, if you don't have that and done well and filed timely, then you're always going to be lacking in that area. So you want to get that done as well and as quickly as possible.
So I have a question I've been thinking about all day that I wanted to ask you. And so let me front load it with this. I think a lot of people feel this. I certainly feel this, that there's a lot of great ideas out there and ologies and things that people follow and read and study. And then human beings get involved and it gets messy. And the analogy I thought of today with strategy, like what's a pure version of that? Chess. All right. So the only thing limiting the capacity of somebody's ability to win every time at some point is their memory, because a computer will beat them every time because it can remember more of this. But that's taking the human element out of it to the extent that it's they're not going to throw any wild cards in there. They're following a specific strategy. How do you think of it like chess? Pure, this strategy will work with the right people, and you guys have to be able to figure out if you're with the right people and you can implement it, or are you creating something based on the reality in which they sit and their strengths and weaknesses?
You always ask these 4-hour questions.
So what was the first part?
So that is a small portion of it. So you can design the right strategy, have the right processes in place and the right people, but you also have an industry that's out there. You have competitors that are acting that you have to anticipate. How will they respond to this? How are we going to respond to the response of the competitors then? Then you have the customer, and will the customer buy this? Are they wanting to pay a low cost, a best value, a high cost? There's a number of factors that go into, yeah, we would like it to be this way and sell a whole bunch of these at this price in a perfect world, but we don't live in a perfect world. We live in a world where there are a lot of stakeholders, and any one of those stakeholders, depending upon their action that they take, could impact even the most perfect strategic plan. So you have to prepare contingency planning, succession planning. Life doesn't happen in a perfect bubble.
You get punched in the mouth and you got to figure out the next thing.
That's Al's saying, right? So
That's a favorite Mike Tyson one.
Yep.
I think it's so important to be flexible too. And speaking with that, like it's we do an evaluation quite early in the process too, because you might have the most patentable thing, but if it's, something that flies around in the sky that's going to replace a car, it's like, well, where are you going to fill up at? So, it's something that's got to be implementable and business wise too. So we evaluate early on. That helps.
Back to the patent question, to the person, they develop the product, and you had said before about putting it potentially on a shelf. One thing that people struggle with is, how do you create a strategy to be able to put a price on something? So somebody that wants to start out and say, because I'll tell a story. When I first was thinking about consulting myself, I said, I'm going to be the best value consultant. The lowest people on price. And then what I found through time is that people wouldn't hire you because you're low price and that they wouldn't want to get it. And plus, I wouldn't be able to pay my bills because I didn't understand the concept of the things that you have to build into your price to be able to make enough money to be able to live with that. And there's a lot of knowledge that you don't have. So how do you teach somebody the fine thing about setting a price that somebody will, because I think a lot of times people undervalue their worth and undervalue the worth of the product, because sometimes they think, one of my favorite stories, there's a consultant that I follow, Alan Weiss, that goes back and he tells the people to double the price. And they go back and they have a hard time getting out of their mouth. And then all of a sudden they say it and people says, yeah, that's fine. I'll pay it because it's worth it. How do you get somebody to think that way? And what kind of information do you help them with? And a lot of people, I think, get stuck with that. They get in, they start thinking about things, and then the realities begin to hit them and it intimidates them. How do you help them with that?
So this goes back to the mindset question again. Yes. So in almost every industry, with the exception of maybe the electric vehicle industry, this does not have a low-cost provider at this point. There is always a low-cost, best value, or high-cost provider. And the industry is divided among those three. So you have to choose early on if you want your products to be low-cost, best value, or high-cost. How do you do that? What goes into that equation? So most people view it from, okay, I need to sell so many of these. Okay, so they view it from a sales mindset. But if you Google the 4 Ps of marketing, you quickly learn that pricing is one of the 4 Ps of marketing and not sales. So if you market correctly and you position your product or your service offering the right way with the right support, the right warranties, everything about it, the right quality, then your pricing then supports that. Okay? So if you're a low-cost provider, that's fine. And 60% of all of your competitors are going to be low-cost providers. And if you want to compete on price at that level, that's fine. And there are a lot of companies that do that and they do it successfully. But if you improve your quality just a little bit, maybe you say, let's respond to everybody's email within 12 hours instead of 48. Provide a little bit better customer service. Now that gives you the ability to move from a low cost up to a best value provider. And when you do that, only 30% of the competitors are in that space. You've eliminated 50% of your competition by improving your quality or your perceived quality, because remember, clients often buy not based upon what's real, but what their perception of reality is. If you can change their perception that they're getting more or more value from it, you can increase your pricing. So you really have to work through, and then you have to look and see what are they looking for, what's the competition charging, and there's a whole bunch of stuff. And we have models where we work through with spreadsheets and everything to help determine that. But there's a lot to pricing other than, it costs me this much to make this, I'm going to mark it up 20%. That is not the way that you price your product or your service offering.
One more thing to go off of that. Can you describe to people what an avatar client is, and how do you go about determining who they are and what they are to be able to sell to them?
Okay. So that is one component, one module of the strategic planning process, is to determine in a perfect world, in Kyle's perfect world that he wants to create, if you could pick the exact 100% characteristics of every customer that you would want. Okay, the geography, the socio-demographic, everything about them. And you could say, this is the ideal customer. This is the box that kind of describes the characteristics for that ideal customer. Every organization should do that. And why should they do that? It's because if you're marketing and you're spending marketing dollars and you're not marketing to your avatar customer or your avatar client, you're wasting marketing dollars. So you want at least 80% of your marketing time, effort, and money to go to that best customer. And what is a best or an avatar customer? It's the one that's going to immediately agree to the pricing that you pick, okay, that you select. They see the value or the perceived value in what you're providing, and they're not transaction oriented. They're going to continue to come back, and they want a relationship with you, so that you have to market and advertise less to them over time, and that the total value of the customer increases as the relationship continues.
Let me follow up one question that I've heard before. And so the one thing you talk a lot about is leveraging your unique selling proposition and your competitive advantage. To somebody out there saying, what are those two things and what does that have to do with business? What do you tell them?
Yeah, it's verbiage that we use in the strategy
Yes.
industry that we need to refine down into common language for everybody. But so the competitive advantage is what differentiates you from the competition. It has nothing to do necessarily, but it can have some overlap with the customer and what the customer is interested in. It's just what is differentiating you from the competition. So the example that I like to use is once upon a time, 15 or 20 years ago, when Nickelodeon had all shows on their station where they would slime everybody with green slime. Heinz came up with green ketchup. Okay? What they didn't realize was green ketchup worked great with the kids who went in the store and said, "Oh, Mom, this is great. Let's pick up." And Mom would say, "You're the influencer. You're not the buyer. We're having red ketchup." So they were the only company that had green ketchup. So from a competitive advantage, they nailed it 100%. They owned the industry. Nobody wanted to buy it. So within 8 months, their $100 million investment in that was gone, and they pulled it from the shelf. Now, the unique selling proposition is exactly why do customers buy from you? Okay? Not necessarily because of the competition and what they offer, but, I like Kyle. Kyle's a great guy. I've known him for 20 years. I'm going to come here because I like Kyle. Okay, that's a unique selling proposition. So as he goes out and networks and
thanks, Scott.
Yeah, so that is people buy because of some unique aspect of the business, regardless of the competition.
Really highly directed emotion.
Yeah, and very seldom do the two overlap. They can, but one of the strategic decisions an organization has to make is, should we market based upon our unique selling proposition or our competitive advantage?
Because that's the one thing right now in the industry we are, dealing with, having people come into an office, because our competition isn't brick and mortar other places. Our competition is the couch and not wanting to drive into work every day.
Starbucks, the couch,
yes, the couch and things like that. And it's the lifestyle changes and things. And that's like where having a strategic mindset is, because people in a lot of cases, they only know what they know. One of my favorites, you don't know what you don't know, and sometimes what you know isn't so. And so when you go back and you challenge things, and then you get those different perspectives, because, one thing that I've been doing now personally is I've been going back and rereading history books that I read in the 1990s. It's like reading the book again for the first time. There's a couple things that I'll remember, but I'm a much different person because of the experiences, education, and things that I have, that things mean more to me. And so when you're soaking in different information, or you're seeing a problem for the third time, but you're studying these things and you have that aha moment, because in a lot of cases, I remember one thing that you said to me before. They said, "Well, what kind of value am I going to get?" And you say, "I don't know, because I don't know what's going to happen," because you have the ideas and the different conversations that mix to create that great idea. And sometimes it's that great idea that you can move upon that will help you grow exponentially.
It's it's really interesting in marketing, where you see a lot of people fall into that trap. Especially in the industry where, not especially, but I know it well, where they're marketing and selling attributes. And then they're essentially in a race to the bottom, as if they're a low-cost provider on who can have the most of these things, these trinkets, as opposed to relating to, what am I actually providing this person? Is it peace of mind? Is it prestige? Is it what is the thing that they're going to go home feeling that they really want? And they don't care if I say, we've got cool whiteboards on the wall, and they don't want to hear that I'm stoking their ego for prestige. But there's a balance in, there's a psychology, I guess, in the study of psychology to get into somebody's head to really understand this stuff.
It goes back to that value. What value or perceived value will I receive? Because, like you said, there's a lot of places where people can rent an office. That's a transaction. You're not looking for transaction-oriented customers to sign up here. You're looking for relationship-oriented ones. So for them, the question is, so what value do you provide versus my couch and being able to sit and watch Andy Griffith all day?
Yep.
So question I have. So I hope everybody listening feels like I feel right now, where we've established you guys as experts. You're the strategy experts, and to be trusted with the experience that you guys have. You have so many different products that you could provide to companies who are interested in strategic planning, strategic growth at different stages of their company, at different things that are going on with their company. A few of them that the strategy in the day, the 90-minute session, I wrote down the Eureka Zone just because that one was interesting to me based on the world we're in here. But how would some of that actually work? If you're talking to somebody that's listening right now and says, all right, these guys know what they're talking about, what does it look like for them to work through a strategy in a day?
Okay. So I'll start big picture macro as a strategist. That's where I begin every conversation. So we do, and we are revising and adding to the website at the moment, but we have programs or solutions or offerings from everybody from the person sitting there at home with an idea that is an entrepreneur or an inventor all the way up through a mid-sized company. So we have a range, and we can offer services to larger companies too, but they're not our avatar, so we don't market to the larger companies. And it depends. And so we spend a lot of time initially meeting with a potential client to understand their situation and what they want. And as I said before about that vision, one of my first questions is, where you want to go with this? What does this look like at the end? And then Ed and I look at it, we talk about it, and we say, based upon our offerings, are we the best ones to help them get there? And sometimes we are, sometimes we're not. And if it's not, that's great. A lot of times we refer them to somebody else. But we let them know early on that we can design a program specifically for you to get you from where you're at to where you want to be. Okay? And I think that is the key. Now, on the strategy in a day, we have about a dozen of those. So it depends on if you are service-based or manufacturing-based. If you're very small, if you're a startup and you need concept to cash, or you're doing well, but you want to expand sales and marketing into a new geographic area. If you want to go global, we have one called Going Global. It's we have something basically for everybody from a startup to a mid-sized company. And all of those are on our website, thestrategyexpert.com. which is being updated a little bit daily right now. We're going through a 2-week refresh on the website, but I tell everybody to keep coming back, and we're updating that all the time.
One of the things that you get different perspectives, and just as we're talking through and we're getting ready to wrap up the podcast and do some other things, I was thinking about my niece that I spent some time with over the 4th of July, and she there's this big cat, like a meme, and the cat goes, huh? And then she would walk around and she'd make this sound, huh, huh. And so a lot of times people are thinking like, what is this, right? And so one thing here at Max 6 that we're looking to do is to get people out of those huh moment of like, what is this going on, versus in going back and starting to have some educational sessions that we'll be partnering with the strategy expert. And the first one, what we're hoping to do is on August 22nd, is to have what we're billing as a strategy fest, where we can go back and start kicking off some of these concepts. Take us through the idea behind that, and what are some of the goals that we're trying to accomplish with that?
Yeah, so part of the day, part of the afternoon, so it's from noon to 4:30 on August 22nd, and we're trying to develop that strategic mindset that we've already talked about. But most people, particularly small to startup organizations, don't understand strategy. They think they even might know a little bit about strategy, but they're really doing goal setting, and they wonder where I could get some more information on this. So we've created a presentation called The 7 Secrets of Strategic Planning. Now, what are we going to talk about? Well, I can't tell you. You have to come on August 22nd, and I'm going to give you those 7 secrets when you show up on that day. It's a secret, yeah. But basically, it's some of those main concepts that people think about, almost all entrepreneurs and small business owners think about, and they're just not quite sure. So we're going to discuss those and spend some time doing that. And then we're going to, have Max 6 here introduce and give a tour to anybody that's interested in the Max 6 facility. We're going to serve some lunch to people. So, if nothing else, you can come and have some fun, have some lunch, learn, walk around, meet some people. The goal at the end, though, is to realize that Mac 6 is an entrepreneurial center that has solutions for them beyond that of just space. That if they're having business ideas, management issues, they have a resource here locally in the community that they can come to and at least discuss some of the possible solutions that they need.
I'm glad that last whole sentence was recorded so that we can use exactly that from now.
Now, after because again, you have that moment and people will absorb a lot of things, but as you said, the strategic muscle is a muscle that has to be worked and developed. So we're going to follow it up with strategy lunch and learns. They're going to be bi-weekly starting after Labor Day. Take us through what some of those things will look like, and the focus will be strategy. Take us through what some of those will look like and your thoughts behind them for business owners.
Sure. We're developing these lunch and learns specifically around topics that entrepreneurs have come to us with over the years. So these are repeated topics that are of interest. So we know they're of interest because they're the exact questions that we've received from entrepreneurs and small business owners. And we're going to kind of capture those, not in our 4 hours that we would like to spend with them, but just over a lunchtime. And it's going to be partially sharing some knowledge with them, and then also opening it up to questions and discussion where they can come in and say, great, pricing will be one of those, I'm sure. And they'll be able to say, I'm a low cost provider. What do I need to do to be a best value provider? Okay. And, we can talk with them offline on that and help them answer those questions. So they're not going to walk away necessarily with all the solutions they need, but this is part of that mindset and that muscle building. We're just starting them down that strategic path of building that knowledge base that they need. I never really thought about that from a strategic perspective.
Welcome to the dojo where you get your strategy treadmill and get to work on this stuff.
And one more thing that we want to try to build after that are the patent fest. I guess we could call it, kind of a place to dream, to turn your dream into reality. What would you envision for something like that to be? So if I'm an inventor, I've got this great idea and I want to come learn something. If they would come and learn to one of your sessions, what would you teach them?
Yeah, well, I'd invite anyone at any stage in the process to come, because you might get stuck right at the beginning or somewhere along the way, and just to get in there and roll up your sleeves and do some learning. We learn some together and interact with each other and just really teach in an understandable and enjoyable way, something that a lot of people get intimidated by, and there's no real need for that. It can be, it's not the simplest thing to learn, but it's definitely learnable and doable, and a lot of people should be doing it that are nervous and are standing by the sidelines.
Any final questions for the group, Kyle?
Not to derail this whole everything we were just talking about, but I did write down 2 questions, one for each of you, that I found some things on your LinkedIn that I'm just curious about. Scott, I saw something on there named to the 2019 Baldrige Board of Examiners to help select the best companies in the United States. That sounds really interesting. How did that come about?
It was interesting. It's a 1-year commitment where organizations apply for the Baldrige Award, and only a dozen or so get selected each year. And so the Baldrige is administered by the Department of Commerce out of the National Institute of Science and Technology, NIST. And they have a very strict criteria that everybody has to adhere to. And they select judges, then independent judges, to go out and assess those organizations. And I was the strategy assessment judge that year for, I think, 3 organizations, and they were both healthcare, ironically. And so I looked at their strategy and the gaps, and what works and what doesn't work, and filled out a report, and then they ended up getting that report. So it was a fun process. It was very intense.
That had to be fascinating.
It's a very intense, and I got to work with a lot of other judges that were of not a strategic mindset because it's operational, functional, and everything. So I learned as much from the other judges as I did from the client engagement. So,
All right, Ned, for you, I was looking through your LinkedIn. You have a Bachelor of Biblical Studies.
Yeah, I do.
So that's interesting based on what you're doing now. And it's interesting. It's come up a few times recently where some of the most interesting, well thought people I know have a similar sort of background like that. What is that about? Where did that come from? And is that still playing a role in what you're doing now?
Yeah, for sure. Well, I always believe in being the best that we can be, and high morality, and doing the right thing day in, day out. And I also like looking at the spiritual side of life too. As we go through here, we should have purpose and meaning, and help others enjoy theirs as well. So it kind of fits in great with what we do on a day-to-day basis too.
I'm currently reading the book of Job right now, so we'll have to talk about that one time.
That's a tough one.
Okay, so we're getting close to the end of our hour. So how could people find you to take us to your website, and so if someone's looking for you, if they listen to this and say, man, goodness, I want to have a conversation with these two great gentlemen, how would they find you?
well, you can go to thestrategyexpert.com. So much like the Ohio State University, we are thestrategyexpert.com. Or you can send, me an email at romeo@thestrategyexpert.com and start the conversation, and I'd be glad to help you or direct you wherever you need to be. And we're here, if they happen to be in the local community, we're here at Mac 6 on every Thursday. So they're welcome to stop by here and meet with us, talk with us, tour the facility. So, yeah.
Okay. Ed?
Very good. Yeah. And I can be on the same, on the Strategy Expert. It's ed.wold@thestrategyexpert.com. And phone numbers are there. And we're, like Scott says, we're pretty personal guys. We'd like to visit and shake hands and talk about whatever's on your mind, and see what we can do, see how we can help.
Any final thoughts, Kyle?
This was awesome. Thank you, guys. This is fascinating. And I would love to spend the 4 hours on each of these questions at some point.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks everybody who's listening. If you have any need for space, first come to mac6.com or come down to Mac 6. We have offerings anywhere from one desk for a day up to suites right now that are about, I think, 5,000 square feet. So thank you very much. And this concludes another episode of The Future of Work. Thank you.